Welcome back to the Crazy Courage podcast. We are back here with another fun guest. His name is John Rich. He is a strategic PR and marketing guy. His agency is called A Rich Opinion, which I'm sure everyone can notice that is a pun. I love puns, and John's actually going to tell us all about it. And apparently, there's a fun story behind that name. So I want to hear it all. John, you go ahead.
Well, Nick, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I agree. I love a good pun, and even the GoDaddy administrators were impressed by the pun. So I guess that's a feather in my hat. The story with the name was a fun little tidbit. About 5-7 years ago, I was working in Washington, D.C., kind of working for a communications agency. And I, like everyone in the corporate world, you're just like, I like my job, but, it's very mundane. It's very monotonous. It's the day to day. It's not really satisfying every aspect that I want. And so, I decided on the side, maybe during work hours, I decided to kind of start my own blog and just kind of wanted to write free form, just kind of whatever I wanted to do. And, at that time I was working in politics and I had a lot of opinions. You don't want to share those in the office. You don't necessarily want to go on Twitter. That opens you up. And so I decided to kind of start a blog where I kind of wanted to put my brand out there, put my thoughts out there, put my name out there, but not my whole name. Kind of wanted to have a little pen name. And so kind of went through it all, had all these different names, and it just kind of stuck, like, oh, I have a Rich Opinion. Yeah,
I love
last name's Rich. This is funny. And so I decided, to start the blog at arichopinion.com. And it lasted for a little bit, but ultimately I realized it wasn't scratching the itch the way I thought it was. Writing was great, but it wasn't picking up, and I felt like I was kind of shouting in the wind at that point.
And that's tough. I'll tell you, sorry, I'm going to stop you there. That is tough. When you have so much to say and you're putting it down and you've got all these thoughts, you're taking the time to craft a really great blog post, but no one's reading it yet.
Yeah.
Right. Before you find your audience. And I've talked about that before, but I got to say that's probably one of the hardest things, even like you're a podcaster, you're a blogger, you're any kind of content creator, author, whatever.
Yeah.
When you're pouring your heart out and no one knows who you are, and like you said, shouting in the wind, I think is probably the best way to put it. Yes. So I understand your pain.
Yeah. And I know, we were talking before we were recording about how this, you're doing this and a passion project, and I respect that a lot. And that was a good lesson for me to learn, and how I'm kind of using it today was, it's not a sprint. Success isn't a sprint. Success isn't overnight success. It isn't posting 3 blogs and then all of a sudden you get a column gig at the Washington Post. That's just not how it works, And so it was a good lesson that I'd like to reflect on now, knowing that, hey, for my current business, I'm trying to create content. I'm trying to meet people like you, and you just got to kind of hit the pavement. And even after 6 months, it might not be enough. And so just kind of having the resilience, the consistency to just stay focused. And at some point, whether it's luck, timing, or skill, or all the above, you'll kind of break through in some regard.
That's right. I don't think there's a timeline. I think everyone's timeline is different, one thing to the next. And luck, skill, timing, like you said, any combination of those 3 could be the thing that propels you forward. But till those things happen, you're just waiting, and you got to keep being consistent and persistent.
Yeah.
Keep it going. I don't think there's much more of a secret to it than that. Just got to grind it out, because everyone else is. That's the thing. You're not the only one doing it. So you got to keep going to stand out.
Yep. So a lot of respect to everyone else. But it's been a good journey so far.
Been a good journey so far. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Tell me about your PR firm. You guys do things differently, right? You were telling me that, and I want to know what's different about your PR firm.
Yeah. So let me kind of, I think the way to best frame that story is to kind of take a step in how I started my journey, if that's cool with you, if
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Sure.
So, I worked in the Washington, D.C. area for about 10 years right out of college, working in various communication roles on Capitol Hill and on other strategic communication agencies, throughout the area, working on every single issue between tech, finance, policy, everything you can imagine I've worked on it. And so I took a 2-year hiatus and worked remotely for a property technology firm based out of San Francisco, California, on the marketing content team. And I thought that was really eye-opening for a couple of reasons. One, working in a corporate setting and understanding corporate marketing and corporate communications was incredibly important for my evolution as a professional.
Okay.
When you work in small boutique agencies, especially in the DC area, which is like public affairs, it's not necessarily the same as corporate communications, and I learned that too. But a corporate setting, it's just so different from a 10-person firm or smaller firms that I've worked with, right? Typically in smaller firms, there's a principal, a VP attached to the account, the head, and then you kind of have a couple other folks that work underneath that individual, and it's a very unique, team-oriented, a couple people in a room, just kind of getting it done.
Small tech group, right?
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, and a lot of the firms I worked with didn't necessarily have, again, because I worked with smaller firms, didn't have concrete policies or procedures or ways to get things done. It was just like, hey, client wants this, let's brainstorm. Here's a good idea. Let's just accomplish it, which is actually a lot of fun, and I really like that setting because it breeds more creativity. You can kind of do more. But working for a corporate firm where we went public during all the lower rates, they handled refinances, and we went public very quickly. So growing from a 4-person marketing team to like a 25-person marketing team and seeing that evolution was really, really interesting. And so that's when I really learned content funnels. When you hear marketers, you think content funnel, right? You think top of funnel, middle funnel, conversions, advocacy, all these different things that I didn't know as a PR professional who did strictly strategic communications. And so after at that gig, rates obviously went up at historic levels and less people refinanced. Basically, no one refinanced anymore. And so I got laid off from that job after 2 years and went back to DC, worked for an old boss, worked for him, great boss, incredible mentor. But ultimately, after working for him, I realized, and kind of reflecting on all my other bosses who were all incredible, just kind of wanting to do my own thing. And I felt that the kind of PR was broken in a sense, that the way we were approaching it was strictly through kind of this media lens, this media communications lens, media relations. Clients want a story in the Wall Street Journal. Clients want to create this newsletter and send it out to these people. And it kind of clicked for me that over time, a lot of agencies do great work, but it's also kind of putting points on the board. We're creating products for them that make them feel nice, right? And more in a sense, versus creating products that are driving results. And that's kind of where I wanted to say, hey, I really want to focus on kind of driving tangible results for my clients. I could send out 100 pitches to reporters on a story, and that is hard work. But it doesn't necessarily bring results all the time, right? And I felt that bringing in some of the marketing aspects that I'd learned working for the San Francisco company and kind of attaching that to the PR components of what I do, brand building and story, kind of create this new category of PR marketing. So that's kind of where I am right now. I'm thinking of a catchy way to phrase it. I've heard trust relations. I've heard marketing relations. I've heard a lot of different terms. I haven't found my term yet.
You haven't found your term?
I'm still looking for that golden pun, but we'll find it soon.
So now, John, do you think from what you've seen, is it that a lot of PR and marketing firms have kind of fallen into what has worked in the past, or they're listening to their clients in terms of letting them dictate what they want, as opposed to really telling the clients, hey, listen, this is what you need to do to get results, or we should try this to get results, as opposed to, like you said, the stuff that makes them feel good. Hey, I got an article in the Washington Post. Yeah, but no one cared about my brand.
Yeah.
There was no boost. There was nothing came of it, essentially. But I can say I was in the Washington Post. Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
If there's no data to back it up to say that actually helped you, are you shouting in the wind again?
Yeah. No, I think the second point you brought up is exactly where I'm at, in the sense of a lot of clients don't know how to leverage PR firms. They don't know how to leverage communications agencies. It's actually,
and to be fair, they should just let you do your job, right? Like they should do what they're good at, building the widgets or whatever the hell they're good at doing, working on their products, services, whatever. And you hire a PR firm to do what they're good at.
go out and get it. The problem with, it's not a problem. I think the client vendor relationship's tricky because as a vendor, you want to get paid. And so to an extent, you're going to do kind of what the client wants.
Right.
But oftentimes clients are great. Sometimes they want something. And as a professional, I'm like, hey, here's kind of some tactics we can employ to get there. Clients like, I don't feel like doing that. Like, I don't want to do this, or hey, we can't talk about this because it's sensitive info. And so a lot of times as agencies, your hands are tied to what tactics you can deploy or what you can do. And so I think agencies fall into this trap of, well, the client told me to do this. I recommended XYZ. They chose Z. I didn't think it was the best path, but I did it. And if it fails, the agency's like, hey, I did what you kind of asked. And so it's kind of this fail safe. It's almost, they're afraid to fail, right? They're not trying to succeed. They're trying to not fail.
Now, are you trying to break away from that?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. What I'm really starting to focus on is I met a great guy. He's one of my clients, a DC venture capital firm, but they're a smaller firm, and they are trying to build their brand, right? They're trying to raise money, trying to build their brand. And so, when I was talking with him, I realized that there are a lot of these similar firms, whether financial or not, but there's a lot of these smaller startups that are trying to build a brand, but they don't have the resources to pay for a large agency or even a boutique agency, right? Yep. Depending on kind of where you go, the minimum is probably around 10 grand a month in major cities. Maybe in smaller cities, you might get a smaller rate, but generally speaking, yeah. And this might sound self-serving, but for PR to really take hold, you need to at least allow for 6 months to kind of really get some traction in some of the campaigns you're putting. And so a lot of these smaller firms don't have 60 grand to put down on a PR firm when they've never worked with a PR firm before and just kind of have faith that it'll work. And a lot of them can't do that. And so what I'm focusing on is smaller firms. I'm trying to help them build a brand in the most efficient way, but creating a community that they can kind of retain. And so where I'm going with this is typically I focus on content creation. I focus on social media, which we can dive into. I still think it's undervalued and underutilized.
Really?
Especially even still. And just trying to help them grow organically and doing the best they can. And that's a domino effect. It has that amplifying effect. When you start growing organically, you build an engaging community, that leads to more opportunities down the road.
Well, let me get your thoughts. Why do you feel social media is underutilized?
I think, especially with smaller firms, they're so busy in the day-to-day. Yep. And it's not necessarily their fault. They're just so busy in the day-to-day that they kind of see it as lowest on the totem pole, right? And that's, again, it's not their fault. It's just they're so busy because they're just trying to ground it out, trying to get started. What I try and come to do is I'm kind of trying to be the Swiss knife for their marketing PR. So what I'm able to do is I can bring some reporter relationships. I understand news cycles. So from the media cycle, I can say, hey, what announcements do you have? What can we put publicly out from a news perspective? And then I could say, yes, this is good. This is not good. We can get industry public recognition. Hey, this could be, a solid tier 2 publication. So I handle the media side. And then when it comes to the marketing side, I obviously can help with digital ads and paid digital ads. Okay. But more importantly, with smaller firms, I recommend them kind of start with organic social media, mainly because it's free, right? You don't have to pay, $15 for an email address. I mean, that actually might be a good deal depending on who you're targeting. The great thing about social media is when you build this community, you get to keep it, right? And so if you send out digital ads, sure, you get to keep an email, which is great, but that email isn't guaranteed to respond to your prospecting or respond to your call to action. Whereas when you're building an engaged community on social media, they're sticking around. The better content you're putting out, they're consistently engaging, and the algorithm is going to find more people for you. And so I think a lot of people hear the word algorithm, they kind of know what it is, but they don't necessarily know how it works for them. And so focusing on building a community that you can retain, right? So again, we talk about consistently grinding 6 months. It takes a long time. If you do even 6 months or 8 months of good quality content consistently, whether that's 3 days a week, I mean, you'll grow a solid base that will listen to you, that stays engaged, that wants to hear from you, and no one can take that away from you, right? And I think that's huge when you're initially building a brand.
And again, it would just go back to the consistency, right? It's like anything else. Even if you're talking about, even back in the old days of cable TV and all you ever saw was the commercial in between the shows or during the shows, you couldn't just see the ad once. Like you had to see the ad many times over time to get that message through, to build the brand, to capture your audience. Like most of those campaigns, the advertising campaigns of old, were long. They weren't just like one ad and I'm done. You can't just do it for 1 week, 1 month. Like you said, this is a long process. You have to commit to it though.
For sure. And that's part of what I'm trying to do with some of the clients I work with, the brands I work with, is help them understand the commitment it takes. And so especially with content creation, it's really hard. They expect to maybe write one blog post here and there.
Right.
They don't want to really do much video. I don't have time. I'm not going to post. Like, what are we doing? We're recording a video for social media. Like, no, I need to go call a prospect or something. And I've noticed working with clients, once they get over that initial cliff of, hey, maybe after a couple months you've consistently focused on this, and then they're starting to see some inbound requests that they weren't expecting, then you kind of see like, they're like, oh, I get it. Okay, we need to do more. And that's kind of been the best moments so far of doing this, is kind of pounding the table on a tactic. It works, and you're like, give me more. This is working. So it's been fun.
Okay, let's go back in time a little bit. So, I mean, you talked about your past a little bit and working in for a bunch of firms and stuff, but like, what made you take the jump? What made you decide, all right, this is it. I'm gonna leave the corporate world, do it on my own?
So there's a couple factors. Obviously, like I said, kind of working on other firms, great leaders, great mentors everywhere I work. I kind of wanted to put my touch on what I was doing, go for it. And I think, in reality, my boys are getting older. I have 2 young boys. They're 5 and 7. I have a third one that's due in about a month.
Wow.
And becoming a father has been incredibly impactful to my life and kind of how I think about what I want out of life for my family and for my children. And a huge motivating factor was waking up one day and just being like, I want to be an example for my kids. And I take my responsibility as a father very seriously. I try not to be a hypocrite in life, in general as a human, but also more importantly as a father. And so I woke up and I was just like, if I want my kid to work hard and be okay with failing and just trying their best at what they do, like, I need to do that too. I can't sit here and just mail it in just because I want to make sure everything's fine. I'm paying bills. I need to go for it.
Nice.
And so I thought of it as 2 ways. Hey, if I go for it and I'm actually successful and I build this thing for the next 10, 15 years, I mean, it's great. That's wonderful. That's what I want to do. But if after a couple of years I fail and I need to go back to a full-time job, I could look at myself and I can tell my boys, I tried to start my own business. It's hard. I learned a ton of lessons, but it's okay to fail. And I learned a lot about myself and about what I can do, and that's okay. You have to try. That was probably also one of the main motivating factors for doing my own thing, is just being an example for my boys.
Yeah. As they grow up, they're going to try new things. And I mean, it might be a little while before they get into business for themselves or try those sort of things, but you'll be able to speak to it. Like, you'll be able to speak to it from experience, and you'll be able to maybe help them avoid some pitfalls and avoid some hard lessons that you've had to learn. You want to lead by example.
Yeah, I think they'll be better for it. I mean, we've always taught them, and they go to kind of like a homeschool co-op where one of the lessons is to kind of fail cheaply. Yeah. Right. We kind of want our children to fail at a young level, and not because we don't want them to succeed, but we want them to try new things. And if they fail, that's okay. They need to learn how to fail. They need to learn from their failures. I'd rather have them fail at a game with their friends when they're 7 and they get upset versus at the age of 35 and they're mortgaging their house on something crazy because they all of a sudden had this impulse to try something. It's hopefully a good life lesson I can share with them at some point.
For sure. Like if you grow, like you said, you got to learn those lessons early on. You grow up thinking that, and I know on our side we do this a lot, but our kids these days growing up a little soft, they're not tried or tested enough. They gotta be tested, because if you go, say, first 20 years of your life without having any kind of challenge or obstacles, not knowing that you can fail, you're gonna 35. You're like what could go wrong, right?
Yeah. When your parents are bailing you out, or someone's always bailing you out, and I got access to dad's debit card, which I did as a college student, and I love my parents. They are incredible people, but kind of wish they were a little harder on me than they were.
But you're right, and you always want the best for your kids. You always want to take care of them. You want to provide, and of course, but there has to be some kind of balance. I try to make sure my kids have some sort of balance where they're not just getting everything handed to them. They do have to earn certain things so that they can learn. Otherwise, you expect everything from the world, and I find when that happens, you don't grow up to be as grateful either. It's the entitlement, right? You grow up expecting things. You want everything handed to you. When it's not handed to you, you don't understand. You just get upset.
I'm kind of experiencing it now. Like I said, I wish I had tried to start businesses when I was 20 and I was okay with being absolutely broke and living with 7 guys in a house and living in a very dirty house. It's better late than never. And it's been an experience. It's been very difficult, but I wouldn't trade it for the world right now.
Nice. Oh, that's great to hear. Okay, so when you say it's been difficult, what pops to mind?
Yeah, well, I'll set this for you. My wife, when I first started this journey, we found out she was pregnant. I think it was soon thereafter. When I already told my boss, like, hey, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to step out. And so the ship already sailed. We were out the door. And then, unfortunately, my wife got laid off soon thereafter.
Jeez, wow, okay.
And so, I mean, that was the time when everyone was getting laid off. It was a rough time, and we kind of looked at it, and we were like, do I go back? What do I do? And as a couple, we have kind of matured in what we want out of life and what we want. We went from trying to keep up with the Joneses to try and focus on what is important to us as a family and for our family.
Smart.
We had sat down, we did a budget, we did all the savings, we just did everything. We're like, hey, here's the runway we have for this based on our potential revenue in the next month or two. And here's our runway. And basically it was like 6-8 months. It's like, hey, now we need to really start thinking about what the next step is if this doesn't work out. And so in that time, and I guess I'll say one lesson to your audience is have practical forecasting. And I have all these leads, right? I have at least at that time, I probably had 4 or 5 leads that if you were to ask me during that time, like, oh, I just got to send an email and they're gonna sign. Like, I'm
that easy.
In 2 months, I'm gonna be making like $50,000 a month. I'm gonna be this, mogul. And boy, does it humble you really quickly. A lot of those clients are still right there. I'm still talking to them. They're still like, hey, I'm looking for money, or hey, I need to make some deals, or hey, let's talk in 2 months. And so that was one of the hardest lessons I learned was you could say, hey, in 6 months, this is going to work out. But to your audience, you need to plan for like the worst case scenario. And it's better to be incredibly conservative with your expectations and then just hope for the best.
Right.
And so that was a huge learning lesson. And I'll say one more thing. Doing this is such an incredible emotional roller coaster. There'll be some weeks where again I'm getting referrals from clients and I'm having incredible pitch meetings. I feel like, hey, I just knocked that out of the park. They're going to call me back and they're going to sign this contract right away. And a reporter responds, and it's like all these things seem to work out one week.
Yep.
Everything goes your way. And then the next week, complete silence, complete darkness. No one's getting back to you. Your client's not happy with you. That reporter that wanted your information is no longer responding to you. I've learned to kind of stay emotionally stable through this process, right? Yeah, don't get too high, don't get too low. It's just kind of just keep grinding. Tomorrow's a new day. And that's been something I've learned about myself. It's just to kind of have that mental strength to just stay even keel as much as possible.
It doesn't take much, does it? Right? Like just to sow those seeds of doubt, have a little bit of fear.
100%.
Right?
100%.
So easy. And I've talked about this before with other people, and I think that's it. I think all entrepreneurs are pretty much in the same boat. They're dealing with it on their own. And I can appreciate that you have a support system at home with your wife, but at the end of the day, it's you, right? So you're stuck dealing with these thoughts. You're doing it. This is your responsibility at the end of the day. And I find it's just so easy for those thoughts to creep in. Like, I got to pull the cord, parachute comes out. I gotta go back to the corporate world, and this is crazy, right? Like during those weeks, those off weeks, I feel like that's where, I know I've done that myself, where I'm like, all right, I gotta think about it, and this is it. This is a bad week. It's never gonna get better, and then it gotta talk myself off the ledge, right? And I feel a lot of people have to do that. You gotta talk yourself down, be like, all right, hold on, we just got a little bit too far into the weeds there. It's just an off week. I find looking back on the successes, looking back on the things that have worked, remind me that it's okay and it'll come again. It's just some sort of cycle, and it can't just be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Is that similar to your experience?
100%. My family has been a huge source of strength for me. At times, I look at them, I'm like, we got to get something going here. I'm hoping that I can succeed for them. But at the same time, I can work, have a rough week or have a rough day, and then I can just kind of unplug. And it's like, hey, you just got to let go. And then you just kind of spend time with them, and they kind of make it better again. I'm a huge baseball fan. I love baseball.
Yeah.
I had season tickets to the Orioles, and played baseball growing up in high school. And just, it's the same thing. You can have a bad game. You just got to go out there again. You can have a bad outing as a pitcher. If you have a bad inning, you got to go back out there. And I think that's helped me a little bit. But it's also, my faith is a huge part of this now, especially, and that's kind of part of driven me to what I'm doing. And so I think having faith is just kind of letting go a little bit and just hoping and praying and just kind of relying on him to guide me. And again, as I said before, if I fail, I fail. And that doesn't make me a failure. It just means I tried and I learned, and we keep moving forward.
And I've talked to some coaches, and they've said that if you fail, let's say your business goes to zero, you don't go to zero. Mm-hmm. You still have all the skills and everything that you've learned along the way. You just need to take it in a different direction or do something different. But you can still build on what you've got. Like, you as a person don't get reset to zero. Sure, the business didn't work, if you want to call that a failure or whatever, but it's a stepping stone either way, right? You can't go back to zero, to back before you had all those skills. You keep that stuff. You learn
100%.
and move on, right?
Yeah.
So now I've had coaches, that's how they like to explain that to their clients, and say, look, you're building, you're moving forward. Whatever happens, you're always just moving forward. Yep. There's no going back. You've already got the skills, so you can't punish yourself by thinking you're a failure. Fine, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And that, that can happen.
Yeah, and if I need to go back to a full-time job, I can go to an employer and say, hey, listen, like I prospected, like I've worked with clients, I've secured clients. There's all these things that if I were just to stay in a leadership role, like a VP of an agency, sure, I work with budgets, but like I never had that stress or the necessity to go out and find, more clients. And so I agree 100%. And I think if more people failed, if more people failed, I think we'd actually have a lot more successful people.
Sure.
Because I think when you go out and try new things, you don't know what you're capable of. And it's like that Michael Jordan quote, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so I'm lining up for a 3 here. Let's see if it goes in.
But that's exactly it. You don't take the shot, and you'll never know. And I'd rather live without regret than always wonder what if, right? Sitting in a cubicle, job is not going anywhere. You have kind of that security, but geez, they're ever sucking the soul out of you. You don't want that, and sit there thinking, my passion was this. I didn't follow it. I could have done really well. Probably, I'll never know. I'd rather know and fail. Life's too short. I see a lot of people around me who work at dead-end jobs, and they're just working towards retirement. Like, but you're killing yourself during the best years of your life.
Yeah.
To get to this, to a place where you're going to be old and your body's a little beat up. What about the journey along the way, right? It's not always the destination.
I think that's a great point. You need a journey at some point. To whether you can work a desk job for your whole career, that's totally fine. But like, What other journey are you doing? Some small things like, I want to run a marathon, right? Like, I feel like every human, to perform at its optimal peak needs to have challenges and needs to have a journey. So it's fine if you want to work a desk job, and it's fine if you don't necessarily like your job. Some people have to work jobs they don't like to pay, and that's respectable. If anything, I respect that more. But I think at some point, whether that's playing sport, painting, training, weightlifting, getting involved in your community, there needs to be some sort of journey. To your point, you need a journey in life, and if it's work, that's great, but you need a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd look back on your life and really have much to think about, or really consider that you've enjoyed life or made the most of it for yourself if you don't have any kind of journey, for sure.
Yep.
I'll tell you, for myself, I made the mistake of, I really did not enjoy school when I was in school. When I was done school, I figured that's it. I'm done learning. I'm good. Hate school. I don't want to learn anymore. I made the mistake of not having any real good personal growth for good 15 years, I would say. And I regret that, because then I met some people and they got me thinking that I don't have to be in school to learn. I can learn by having discussions, talking to people, mastermind groups, taking courses that mean something to me, reading books. You can absorb knowledge. I mean, right now I'm talking to you over a computer, which is connected to the information superhighway. Everything's at my fingertips. There's no reason why I can't find something interesting to learn about. And I regret a little bit that I didn't have any real journey during that time. I went through whatever I had to go through to get where I am today. I understand that. But now I appreciate learning new things and having challenges and taking on new projects. Like this podcast is a new project that I took on. And I had to learn from scratch how to do a podcast. Not that anyone can't figure it out. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but it was a challenge for me. But I was happy to take on that challenge, and I'm glad I did. For wherever this podcast takes me, I will have that journey. I'm with you. That makes sense. You got to have something in your life that you put your energy and your passion into. If that's PR and marketing, and you can make a living at it, and all the more power to you.
Yes, I remember there was one woman. I was working a temp job. This is like in high school, and she said, "Make your career, like, do what you love." And you always took that as kind of it's like a cliche. You're like, I'd love to play baseball. I'd love to do this, right? Like, I'd love to do it for a career, and I was maybe too singular at the moment to kind of think like, well, I love baseball, so let's just play baseball.
Right. Good. That's not a big deal.
Just keep showing up to practice. They'll start paying me at some point,
Yeah. Right.
Now I'm, again, starting to learn, starting to do more. I'm doing more research. I'm trying to create more content. I'm trying to dig in. And I think that's a huge part of my journey right now is I'm trying to find a way to create value for people. And I'm trying to find ways to create tangible results for my clients. And so digging into my own content creation, for instance, I've never been as someone that now pushes social media as a tool for brands pretty heavily. Was never a big social media person. Didn't really post a lot for personal gain. I look at Twitter, I look at LinkedIn, I looked at Instagram.
Yeah.
But I never shared anything. And so when I started this business, one thing I had to kind of break this mold of this insecurity, this nervousness of what people will think about what I'm doing. And so for 4 months, I didn't even put it on LinkedIn to say that, hey, I'm starting my own business.
Really? What would keep you from doing that? Were you purposely not putting it on there because you were worried?
Yes, it was the avoidance. It was the I'll do tomorrow. This is not the right way to do it. I wrote a blog 3 times on my announcement blog. I wrote it 3 times on separate occasions.
Wow.
It was a stall tactic. And one day I was just like, we have to do this. My wife is on me. She's like, you haven't told people on LinkedIn. I haven't seen anything. And I was like, I know. And one day, got to press the send button, and you just kind of hope for the best. And I think another lesson that I can impart to your audience is just you kind of just have to go on the limb and just kind of, again, have faith. And generally speaking, people will support you. People will be behind you. People that care about you, whether they're your best friends or people that you've worked with for 4 months, people will support other people. And so that's been really eye-opening, and breaking that barrier has been kind of fun. And so it's been a journey, and I'm happy I learned that about myself, that I can kind of break out of that mold and be a little more outgoing on social media.
Some growth right there.
Worth.
You're learning new things. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, who is it? Brene Brown. She likes to preach that when you put yourself out there, whether you're performing on a stage or putting anything in front of an audience, it's scary.
Yeah.
Right? You're putting yourself out there, and it's like you said, you might just be scrolling whatever social media, but other people are putting things out there, and it's scary because you're inviting all these people to judge you or form some kind of opinion or whatever, and that can be scary for sure. She goes on to talk about how it's really brave when people do that. Like, it's a kind of bravery to just to do that sort of thing. I don't know, people have such a fear of public speaking as an example, right? Like, you're putting yourself out there in front of the audience, and that's scary for sure. I get that. So you put any degree of anything into the public, yeah, it can be scrutinized. It could go sideways. And you see it these days, right? Brands putting out tweets that go viral for the wrong reasons or whatever. You're like, oh God, what's the worst case scenario? Oh, well, now I'm viral, and I don't want to be viral known as the guy who did whatever. I want to go viral for something positive, but that's not usually as funny.
Well, you know what? I'll be honest. If I go viral for the wrong reasons, I'd be happy about it because I'd be going viral. Yeah. All PR is good PR, I guess. That's what some say.
Yes.
It's been fun. And I think initially I was nervous about, oh, people will see that only 2 people like this post, or like, hey, no one's commented on this post, but like,
yeah, that's
ultimately
tough.
People, but at the end of the day, people don't really care, right? I can only speak for myself. I was so nervous about what some of the negative outcomes of what might come of that. And in the same sense, I wasn't looking at the positive outcomes. I wasn't looking at all the messages I would get of support. I wasn't looking at all the people that would share my posts and be like, hey, John's great, follow him. And I know we're just talking in a social media vein.
It's the same thing. It's what,
And so people shouldn't harp on the negatives, because if you harp on the negatives, you're going to have negative outcomes, right?
That's that for sure.
Be an eternal optimist.
Yeah, try, right? You got to take the shots. If you don't take the shots, you're never going to score.
Yeah,
like you said.
Absolutely.
I love these sports analogies. It's great. I'm terrible at sport. I love playing sports. I'm terrible at most of them, like all of them. I'm not good at any particular sports. I'm from Canada, play hockey. I love playing hockey. I'm terrible at it, but I love playing it. Like, people want to play with me, it's great, but I warn them, like, look, I'm terrible, but I will play with you.
Well, the key is, are you able to at least hold your own? Are you able to hold your own on a team sport?
I like team sports because I'm never going to carry the team.
Yeah.
And the better guys will carry me. So, like, I've never played any competitive sports. Like I said, I enjoy playing all sorts of sports, summer, winter, all that kind of stuff. I've never really gotten into any sports really heavily where I was training and practicing every day. And obviously I would have to if I wanted to be good at anything. But just to say, I love the sports analogies. I love sports. Yeah. But I'm not. I should be more athletic, but I'm pretty clumsy. I'm too clumsy to be athletic.
That's something we all say. We look in the mirror. Yeah. Should be more athletic. What's happening?
Yeah, I think my athletic sport would have been slapstick comedy because I'm so goofy and clumsy. That's about it.
There you go. That's a sport.
If I went pro, that would be it.
Maybe one day, maybe this podcast will lead you to a stand-up gig. Maybe you'll get the courage to do an open mic.
I've talked about that with people. So writing a book, I think, could be one of the most difficult things. And not like AI and like sitting down, writing a book, your thoughts out of your head. Writing a book start to finish, I think, would be one very difficult. And like we talked about, right, creating content when people don't know you, right? Like, if I were to write a book now, nobody knows me, no one would read my book. It would be so taxing to write a book, and I appreciate all the authors that are willing to do it, because I don't know that I could do it. The other thing, stand-up comedy. I would love to be able to do it. I don't even know if I could. Man, that is like jumping out of a plane for me without a parachute.
That's very scary. I've been to some open mic nights, and admittedly, I've judged people. I'm like, this dude is not funny. Right? It is hard. It's possible.
But like I said, writing a book and truly writing a book, and stand-up comedy. I think those are the two things that I would love to be able to do. I don't know that I could ever do them. And stand-up comedy, I'd love to do it. It's just, man, like you said, people look at you like, guy, you are not funny. And I watch a lot of stand-up comedy, and you know, and I look at some of these guys and I'm like, they're not doing anything really special. You know, some of these guys, like, the guys are really funny. They have a good rhythm, they have a good flow, a good personality on stage. But I get it. I'm not saying it's easy. they're just out there doing it, and they have the confidence. The guys that are good at it, they're confident. Like you said, every once in a while you look at these guys like, okay, this guy's not funny. And to be fair, not all comedy is my type of comedy. Like I've looked at some stand-up comedies that shows that these guys have like millions of followers and it's really popular. Like, why do people like this guy? Change channel or whatever. Netflix, stop screaming, whatever, you know.
I just think if it's, especially going up and doing something you're uncomfortable with, stand-up comedy in general, I think people have their own, especially the good ones, they have their own style and they realize what worked and they just double down on that. So to your point, some of the jokes are like, they're not crazy jokes. It's just their personality or how they deliver it or how they carry themselves, right? Or if one comedian was very skinny and not very fat, it probably wouldn't land, or vice versa. It just works out.
They found their thing. Yeah, all these guys that are successful found their thing and they make it work. And more power to them. Like I said, I love stand-up comedy. I wish I could do it. I'd be scared to death of going and do 2 minutes on an open mic night. I don't know that I'll ever look back and regret not doing it. I would just love to be able to do it.
Let's do it once. You know what? You know what you should do? Every week, open mic night, you should take a couple shots and be like, am I do this? And maybe after a couple weeks, you might be like, F it, let's do it. Let's just go up there.
A couple shots of vodka before I go up on stage or something, just to loosen up. I don't know. It's okay, John. Back to you. We got off the rails here, but it was a good chat. How did you get your first client?
That's a good question. Kind of working in DC, it just basically maintaining a network. So I had moved to Richmond, which is about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. And so I was kind of out of the networking scene where you're constantly meeting people. As I started to work back in D.C., I started going up for lunches and dinners and just trying to be on the ground and just trying to, reestablish that connection.
Okay.
Basically met with a friend, kind of mentioned, some of the work I had been doing, kind of considering my own thing. And he connected me with that client. Was like, hey, they're a smaller firm. They're looking for someone. It was almost like divine intervention. It was just really good timing. And we had a great initial conversation over Zoom. And then I went into the WeWork where they had their office. I had a deck and it was an exhilarating experience. It was so much fun. I kind of wish I could go back to that high again just because it was fun. It was a very challenging conversation. It was constantly being peppered with questions. It was very mentally challenging in a good way. And the conversation went well, and they like me, and we are now still partners going forward. So that was also an exciting experience. When you work for corporations or you work for agencies, typically the founders, the presidents, and the vice presidents typically generate the business. They're responsible for the business development.
It's their relationships, right?
And they're responsible for bringing it on, and that's their role. And so typically I hadn't done a lot of that just because I didn't really have to. And so that was again stepping outside of my comfort zone,
right.
And working with potential clients and pitching them and trying to say the right things. And I think another reason to go back on this, why I started my own brand, was I wanted to speak for myself. I had my own ideas. I had my own tactics. I had my own kind of thoughts on how to approach certain problems. And
you had a rich opinion, right?
Yeah, I have opinions. Yes, they could make people rich. Maybe they'll make me rich. I don't know. But I didn't want to speak for other people, and not because I didn't care about those people or I didn't want to see them succeed. I just wanted to take the muzzle off and just be like, I think you should do this, or like, no, that's not the right idea. I was on a call a while ago with one of my former bosses, and we were kind of doing a debrief after a client call, and he was like, well, I wouldn't have worded it that way. I would have worded it this way. I would have done this way. And okay. But I gathered that was I'm constantly speaking on behalf of someone else, or I'm representing someone else. And I understand that's how business works, right?
Sure.
And I get that. But for me in the smaller agency world, I was always this person's person, or he's on so-and-so's team. And so I kind of wanted to be like, hey, I want to represent myself. I feel like I bring a unique approach to some of these problems. And that was another driving factor for starting my own thing. I wanted to speak for myself, and I wanted to represent myself in some of these meetings and not have to worry about how I say things, what tone I say them,
right?
These different things. And so that was
because it's you. You're trying to be genuinely yourself.
Yeah. And it's been incredibly rewarding. I think it's part of the reason why I'm much happier.
Happier. Awesome.
Much happier. I don't have that beach house yet. business, but I am much happier, and it's
Pretty much happier. I mean, the beach house would be nice. Of course, everyone wants the money pouring in and all the stuff, but the much happier part is that, does that help you get through the day?
100%. You kind of wake up with a purpose.
Yeah.
With another friend of a friend, I think it's my wife's friend's husband, and he said this a couple of years ago, and I kind of got it, but it didn't really stick with me. He goes, I left my job and I'm starting a company completely unrelated to what I was doing. And he's like, I stopped waking up with a purpose. I stopped waking up and like I stopped like wanting to get up early and like get after it. I stopped wanting to do that. And I heard it and I was like, oh, that makes sense. That must be a great feeling. But only until recently doing this have I realized that like I want to get up. I have a whiteboard. I have a lot of things I want to accomplish. I'm kind of excited for it. When you hear people on podcasts and influencers saying, oh, you dread the weekdays when I live for Mondays, and it seems kind of dumb, but it kind of makes sense though.
Right.
When you're working for yourself and you're making your own money and you can't rely on anyone else, you do kind of get that sense of urgency, and it kind of springs you into action, and it's fun. It's nice.
Awesome. Well, that is fantastic. I love to hear that. So I would say, John, then it's fair to say that you as a person are different today, right now, than you were, say, 6 months ago?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is your professional self, we'll say.
Yeah, I think both professionally and as a human, I think I've tried to be more empathetic. I've tried to be more understanding. I've tried to be more patient. Again, just learning to be patient in this business has made me a more patient person, I think. Obviously,
It's going to make you a great parent, I'll tell you that.
I think it's helping. I'm a bad parent.
Patience is key.
100%. But yeah, it's, again, you're learning every day. I'm learning about myself, and I'm learning about others, and I'm learning kind of how the world works, and I'm learning what I'm capable of, and that's constantly the most thing. And when I started this, I said to myself, like, okay, there have been times where I've mailed it in at my jobs. Admittedly, I think we've all done it. Am I going to be able to cut this? It's also like, am I going to be able to actually do this, or am I not able to do this? It's like a test to myself. And so I'm trying to learn what I'm capable of, how I can motivate myself, and what I'm able to accomplish on my own. Right. And so it's a journey of discovery.
Fantastic. Those are important. That's how you learn the most about yourself and who you are and what you like and don't like, and you get the most growth. So, John, you are where you are today. Come a long way, 6 months. Where do you go from here?
Well, I do have my dream is to certainly build this a little bigger. I'd love to work with a lot of different people. I have this picture of creating a firm that has a very diverse skill set in terms of the different people, whether that's adding a creative person that can do in-house creative, adding maybe a person that has really good media connections, and I can let them do that, and then have a person that is kind of like a content-focused person or creative, more of a strategy person. But what I would really love to do, if I'm able to build this thing, is create a structure that properly incentivizes employees. And
okay. Yep.
I think I've been a victim of this, but again, it's my fault. I'm trying to say, I've always kind of said like, well, I get paid a decent amount, but I don't feel that motivation as an employee. And so I think for me, if I were to have a crystal ball, I think the future of corporate work or smaller agencies is not an employment model. And so speaking with some of my old bosses and how they operate and run, the regulations, the taxes, just the work to have employees is kind of daunting. And if you've never started a business or had employees, you would never really understand it. And so how I would like to build my business is basically almost like a co-op where everyone would have their own entities, and we would essentially have partnerships in terms of each operating entity. And so how that benefits me as an employer is I don't have to pay the taxes or do the regulations behind health insurance for my employees or 401ks or all these different things.
Okay.
So that's a win for me. But also I think having partners where I can create contracts and saying, okay, hey, say if I bring on like an associate, someone that can help me do kind of this grunt work, I would tell him or her like, here's your monthly retainer. You start your own LLC. Here's whatever, $1,000 a month for what you do. You can lead this account. And if this account grows over its contract term, so say they resign for another 6 months at an additional at 50%, the agreement will say you get 25% of that increase, or
Okay.
you need to be incentivized in such a way. Because I felt like always as an employee, while there's benefits, there's bonuses, there's all these different benefits to being an employee, I think having real skin in the game, I think motivates employees. So
Yes.
I think it would motivate them to work harder, to build out that account, to get more money, and then in that way,
Yeah.
I make more money. It's just a good way to everyone all to be on the same page.
I agree with you. Otherwise, like you said, you end up phoning it in after a while because it's just the same old thing. You're on the wheel, you can't get off, and it's just the same old scene.
It's all about incentives. And if you can build an organization that, again, focuses on all working more and harder towards a common goal and everyone's rewarded, I think everyone's happy. It creates a better culture. It creates a better product. You see all these leaders talking about, I used to love it, right? We used to go to one of my old son's daycare, and, we would talk to some of the teachers, and, there were complaints about them not getting paid enough, like some of the daycare people. And so Teacher Appreciation Day comes around, and they have like donuts at the front of the thing. And I'm like, it's cool, but just pay them more, or do something more than just donuts.
Yeah, the donuts, and it's great for that morning or whatever. Then you go back to the afternoon, and the sugar rush wore off. Like, all right,
yeah,
I'm not getting paid more.
Or maybe give them some extra help. To me, I would think that would solve that problem of just saying, hey, here's an incentive, here's how we can align our goals, and let's go for it. So.
I agree with you. Silicon Valley's been pretty famous for their perks and ping pong tables and lunches or whatever, but in the day, that's great, but I can't pay my bills with ping pong table.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't get me any further ahead. Doesn't matter from the ping pong champ or the office.
Yeah, they have options and stuff, but it's just, I think especially now with remote work, and I think a lot of the digital landscape that's changing, I know companies are trying to bring people back into the office, but I think over the next 10, 15, 20 years, remote work's going to be, it's going to be here. It may not be the primary mode of work, but it's going to be a huge part of it. And so
sure,
remote workers aren't necessarily as motivated, as they are in the office, and that's just the truth.
Yeah.
Let's call it
yes, absolutely.
So I think you're going to have to find a different payment structure to incentivize those employees. And I think offering a chance to give them a cut of the increased revenues or whatever is the best way to do it.
I think it's a great idea. Well, John, I think I'm going to cut it off here. I think we've gotten a really good sense of what you're doing and what you're up to. And I really hope that you can work towards that beach house that you're looking for too. But before we go, I do want to say congratulations.
If I get the beach house, I'll send you an invite.
I appreciate that. I'll bring the sunscreen. And before we go, I do want to say congratulations. Baby on the way. It's very exciting. Obviously, you're used to being a dad. You and your wife are probably old pros at the newborn thing, but it's going to be super exciting for sure.
Yeah, it's a blessing, and we're excited. But thank you so much for everything. Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
You're very welcome, John. It was wonderful, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Sir, see ya.
Bye.